The Sun Devils have no shortage of depth at the wide receiver position, and it might be enough to help elevate the offense.
You are Locked On Sun Devils, your daily podcast on the Arizona State Sun Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Richie Bradshaw, and I will be your guide for everything Arizona State Sun Devils. A shout out to my everydayers who are here every day, and thanks for making us your first listen of the day. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications wherever you're getting your podcast. Stay in touch with the show by following me on Twitter at RichieBrats36. And if you have not subscribed on YouTube yet, hit that subscribe button. We are trying to get to 1,000 subscribers before the season starts. As of today, we are at 821 subscribers. We are growing rapidly. Now's never been a better time to hit that subscribe button. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCalls for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back in. Today, we are going to be wrapping up the wide receiver position for Arizona State. We talked about Jordyn Tyson a couple of days ago. We talked about Troy Omeire yesterday. If you did not see those two episodes, go check them out because we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about those two today in detail. Instead, we're going to be looking at the best of the rest, if you will. Jake Smith, Melqaun Stovall, Xavier Guillory, all the young guys, the depth that's there. There's a lot here for Arizona State. We're going to take a look at those guys. We're going to talk about the things they bring. Then we're going to do our little bit of stat predictions where we look at a best case, worst case, and my prediction for their collective yards and touchdowns. And then we got to talk about the room as a whole, what it brings to the offense. But for the stat prediction series, I need to give you the stipulations for this. First of all, this is based on the assumption that these guys will stay healthy and the passing game will play some kind of significant role in here. This is also a best case and worst case scenario, as well as my prediction, which I am basing off of my own thoughts. So now that that's out of the way, let's talk about the next group of guys. So after Jordyn Tyson, Troy Omeire, there are three guys that you can put in any order you'd like. In fact, you could make any of them your wide receiver too. Would not oppose you, would not give you any pushback. Let's start with the guy who I think is really criminally slept on going into this year, and that's Melqaun Stovall. Stovall last year put together a quality season for ASU. It wasn't anything that was too substantial to stand out because the offense as a whole didn't do too much. 18 catches, 207 yards. He did get some work in the return game, but I just felt like when Stovall was on the field, you had a really good safety valve with him. And he's somebody that during his time throughout college football, when he was at Colorado State, when he was at Nevada, he is a good little safety valve for your team. His best season was in 2021, where he caught 56 passes for 643 yards and a touchdown. That is within the realm of possibilities for him this year if he were to be given that wide receiver 2 role. He's a really good slot receiver. That's something that is going to get him on the field for Arizona State, is having that niche ability to go inside, work on the smaller defensive backs and anybody else that lines up on top of him, create separation, get open. And is he going to be a big play threat down the field? I don't think so. He hasn't been that previously in his 5 seasons. He's that check down guy for me. You need 3 yards, he'll get you 5. You need 5 yards, he'll get you 7. You need 7 yards, he'll get you 8. Like, he'll get you what you need. But I don't know that there is this super high upside that you have for like a Jordyn Tyson or a Troy Omeire. Instead, you've just got little old reliable for the team. He's also the most veteran guy here with going into his 6th season in college football. So he's seen it all. He's done it all. He knows how to work. He knows what to expect out of himself. But there's also a factor here that he's a good veteran mentor leader for the younger guys as well. Korbin Hendrix and Caleb Black and some of the other guys are looking towards Melqaun Stovall to be one of the guiding voices in that room for you. There's also the question about special teams, but I think you've got two really, really high upside guys with Jordyn Tyson and Malik Brown as special teams players right now. We'll wait and see how that ends up fleshing out and looking like, but Stovall's in your back pocket for sure. If neither of them works out, if something happens, if you need to change something up, Stovall did some return work last year. He can do it again this year. Jake Smith is one of the guys that I know everybody is really, really excited about in the Sun Devils community. Jake Smith did not get to play last year. He was ruled ineligible by the NCAA for their 2-time transfer policy. He is back. He changed his number. I was looking today on the team's website. He is number 8 now. Number 3, he swapped with Malik Brown. So Brown is number 3, and Jake Smith is number 8. Number 8, pretty clean for receiver. I think 3 was better, but, that's my own opinion. Bottom line, though, he's back. And it's going to be a very interesting storyline this year to see how Jake Smith ends up playing out for the Sun Devils. Is this going to be wide receiver 2? Is this going to be wide receiver 1? There truly is that potential here. This is a former 4-star and a very quality 4-star player. Now, it has been a few years since he came out of high school, out of Notre Dame Prep, I believe, but the talent is still there. And he's shown flashes when he did get on the field for Texas and for USC. You've been able to see some of that capability there. We just haven't got a full season out of him. And your question now is, was a year off what he needed to jumpstart his college career? I think this is his last season. He might have one more year because of the NCAA providing an extra year of eligibility to the players who were ruled ineligible last year. So I think he has 2 years. The more I think about it, I feel like it's got to be 2. I don't know. This could be his last hurrah, though. This could be it. Like, he has a good season, he's out of here. There's going to be a lot of, I won't call it pressure. I would say there's a lot of onus on him to come out and have the best year possible, have a career year in order to get back on track to getting to the next level. He is more than athletically gifted enough to play football on Sundays or in any other professional league. It's just a matter of stringing it together. This is a big year for him. Xavier Guillory. Guillory is really interesting because Guillory started the year last year as wide receiver 2 for the team, and he looked capable. Now, there was a case of the drops for sure. He definitely had some adjusting that he had to do. He was, I won't say he was phased out of the offense, but he took a backseat role to Troy Omeire down the stretch. He was also dealing with injuries. I know at the start of training camp or spring ball that Kenny Dillingham said he was recovering from a foot surgery, which was something that held him out towards the end of last season. If he's 100% good to go, then how do you fit him into this offense? You already had him as wide receiver 2 to start the year. Can he get back there? This is another player who, prior to coming to Arizona State, when he was at Idaho State, he balled out. His last year at Idaho State, he brought in 52 passes, 785 yards, 4 touchdowns. He's a big play weapon too. This is that stretch the field player for the Sun Devils. Outside of Jordyn Tyson, I think Guillory might be your best straight line runner at the receiver spot to stretch the field and unlock the deep ball. That has value for the Sun Devils, and that could end up being something that really turns into a niche role for him and gets him onto the field. Is like, hey, it's 3rd and long. We need to be able to push the ball down the field. let's get Guillory out here. Let's see if he can make a play in space, find a way to get open. He also had that 47-yard touchdown in week 1 against Southern Utah that came on 4th down from Jaden Rashada. That was it was a prayer. He threw up a prayer and Guillory came down with it. He has the capability to be a big play weapon for the Sun Devils. It's just a matter of putting it together and whatever the role might be. Last year, he finished with 21 catches, 226 yards, 1 touchdown. He could repeat that or he could double it. And I would not be surprised if he doubled it. I wouldn't be surprised if he was in that 400 to 500 yard range because we've seen that the Sun Devils do have intrinsic value with him. We'll see how it ends up playing out. There's younger guys as well that are worth talking about. Kaleb Black, friend of the podcast, somebody who's been working very hard in the offseason and is trying to get himself onto the field. He saw the field a handful of times last year. Didn't really get too many statistics on the year, but there were some meaningful snaps, especially towards the end of the year. I think that Arizona State wants to see him be able to take that step forward. Maybe he takes on that Melqaun Stovall role that I was talking about as that slot receiver. Kaleb Black, between 5'9" and 5'10", is not the biggest guy in the world, but he's quick, he's electric, and he's fast out of his breaks. When you have guys like that can work the slot, you have value to your offense. He could find a way. Korbin Hendrix, exact opposite of Kaleb Black, 6'3" to 6'4", depending on what he officially measures in at. He's got good speed. He's got really good length. He's someone that stood out to me in spring ball, and I don't know what the role looks for him this year, but he definitely feels like somebody that's going to be a part of the future of this wide receiver position for the team. So could we see him more involved at the end of the year? Because in a perfect world where the wide receiver position really works out for ASU, you could lose your top 5 guys. Like Jordyn Tyson could go pro. Troy Omeire's out of eligibility. Jake Smith is either out of eligibility or he can go pro. Melqaun Stovall out of eligibility. Xavier Guillory out of eligibility. You need to start getting your young guys some reps and opportunities, and Korbin Hendrix could be one of the guys near the top of that list for you. Also want to throw out Zachariah Sample, the incoming freshman. When I spoke with Rashad Samples before he left Arizona State, he said that they had some plans for Zachariah and they wanted him to get involved. I don't know if that's a Kaleb Black role like last year. I don't know if that's a bigger role for the Sun Devils. I don't know if that's completely changed because it's a new wide receivers coach now with Hines Ward. They recruited him. They liked him. Let's see how it ends up shaking out for him. That's the wide receivers in a nutshell. We're going to go ahead and transition and do some collective stats for the position in just a moment. This is the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace for Major League Baseball and makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. You can save up to 60% on buying last-minute tickets for sports, comedy, concerts, theater, and more. Save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event, where you can try the zone deals where you can save by choosing a section and letting Game Time choose the seats. Their all-in pricing feature will show the total upfront, and no surprise fees will hit you at checkout. You can get a panoramic view of your seat in the app before you buy, so you know what to expect before you arrive, and the lowest price guarantee means that Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you find tickets in the same section and row for less. And of course, your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Wherever you're getting your podcast, hit like, hit subscribe, turn on notifications wherever you're getting your shows. I appreciate you for tuning in, as always, and making us your first listen of the day. And shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. And if you have not subscribed on YouTube yet, hit that subscribe button. We're trying to get to 1,000 before the season starts. We will find a way to celebrate when we hit 1,000. I don't know what that'll look like. I am always open to suggestions for whatever that may be. An ice bucket challenge, a 40-yard dash. I don't know. Give me an idea. We'll throw it out there, put it into the ether. Back into our conversation now and taking a look at the potential collective stats for the Sun Devils wide receiver position. Now, this will include Jordyn, Tyson, and Troy Omeire, but it doesn't necessarily mean that my predictions for them are factoring in here. Like I said, I think I said they were both around 800-yard receivers. I don't have it written down in front of me. So they could still get that, but you could also have a situation, and I mentioned this in both the podcasts, where you have like 3 or 4 receivers that each have 400 yards, and you just kind of take it and run. It's about finding the distribution between those guys. So this is also only accounting for the wide receivers. I want to make that note right now. This is not including tight ends. This is not including running backs, which is why a best case scenario and a high in total receiving yards from the wide receivers, I'm going to say a flat 2,000. This would be if we were to say, if we say Omeire and Tyson each get 700 yards. Now you have 600 yards to divvy up between Guillory, Smith, Stovall, and then the younger guys as well. 600 yards between even the top 3 guys. It's 200 each. It's very, very doable. You could split it 100 and change each with Kaleb Black, with Korbin Hendrix, with Korbin Bourget, with Zachariah Sample. There's plenty of options here to fancy and move and distribute the ball around. You would think if you're combining for 2,000 passing yards from your wide receivers, that you probably have at least one standout with Tyson or Omeire, maybe even 2 standouts. The worst case scenario, I'm not going to go 1,000 because I just don't think that these wide receivers are not good enough to be less than 1,000. I'm still going to say about 1,300. This would be a situation where you have 3-ish guys who have around 400 yards and then change from the rest of the guys. So maybe your team leader is Jordyn Tyson with 500 yards and Troy Omeire contributes 300, and then a handful of other guys do some stuff. Like, it's not out of the realm of possibilities. Last year, Elijhah Badger had 700 yards. The next closest was Xavier Guillory with 226, and then Troy Omeire with 223 and Stovall with 206. That puts you, just those 4, right around or a little over 1,300 yards. Obviously, there's change to be dealt with the rest of the guys too. But again, this is the reason why I think 1,300 is still pretty low. This is still a really good wide receiver room, even without Elijhah Badger in it. You still have 2 guys that I have mentioned are capable of being wide receiver 1s, guys who are sleepers in the Big 12 Conference to just be very good players. My overall prediction, I'm probably about 1,600 yards. I'm leaning towards that. I think guys will be 300 to 400 yards and then 1 or 2 standouts. In this scenario, we'll say Tyson goes 700. We'll say Omeire goes 600. So that's 1,300. And then that would still only be about 300 between the rest of the guys. So, I'll bump it up to 1,700. I do think that ASU is going to find a way to distribute the football to these wide receivers. And at 1,700, that fits my philosophy of you can have 3 to 4 receivers with 400 yards each, and then 100 more to hand out to somebody else. 1,700 is not bad. as long as you're getting production from the running backs and from the tight ends to be able to contribute as well. Best case, 2,000 yards just from the wide receivers. Worst case, 1,300 yards. I still feel like that's really low. My prediction, about 1,700 yards. Touchdowns. And again, this is receivers only. Best case scenario, I mean, with the receiver talent here, I'm saying 20. I am saying 20. Now, there is also a catch-22 here, and ASU could have 20 receiving touchdowns from the receivers and less than 5 from the rest, including tight ends and running backs. This is not indicative of like, hey, the Sun Devils are going to throw 40 touchdowns this year. 20 of them are going to come from wide receivers. Not the case. You could throw 20 touchdowns to your receivers and then 23 total. It's a lot to do with how good the receiver room is, but it's equally important to mention that it could siphon those touchdowns away from your big tight ends, from the running back opportunities, from Scattaboo, and from Malik Brown and anybody else. 20 is a lot. That's like, you would have to have Troy Omeire go bonkers. He'd have to hit that 10 touchdown ceiling that I said for him. And then you'd have to have Tyson chip in 3, 4, 5 as well. And then the other guys cumulatively give another 5 to 6 touchdowns, somewhere in that realm. Lowest I could see, I have 10. I just don't think it's going to be lower. Again, like I said, with the receiving yards, this is too talented of a room to not be able to air the ball out. And I understand that last year you had Elijhah Badger and you still only managed 8 touchdown passes. That had more to do with the health of the quarterback position than it had to do the talent at the receiver position. Elijhah Badger could have 8 by himself. He is that talented enough. He's gone, but Jordyn Tyson and Troy Omeire are talented enough to be 5 to 8 touchdowns each. There's still that possibility, though, that the quarterbacks don't play as well like they did last year, and you're hit by that lack of production. So the low of 10 touchdowns, that would be right about where you were last year. 3 went to Badger, 3 went to Omeire. That's not your ideal scenario, but it could happen. My prediction, I'm on the low-ish side simply because I don't think ASU is going to air the ball out a ton this year in terms of touchdowns. I'm saying 13. This would be, if I went 13, I'd say Omeire gets at least half of that, 6 to 7 touchdowns for him, and then spread them out everywhere else. This should be an offense at the receiver position that's good enough to spread the wealth around, so you don't necessarily have one guy that has to contribute the most through the air. Best case scenario, wide receivers only, 2,000 yards, 20 touchdowns. Worst case, 1,300 yards, 10 touchdowns. My prediction, 1,700 yards, 13 touchdowns, which in my opinion is a pretty good year from that position. We're going to talk about the overall depth of the position and round it out with whether or not they can elevate this offense to round out the podcast. This is the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. One more time, wherever you're getting your shows, hit like, subscribe, turn on notifications. Follow me on Twitter at Richie Bradshaw36, the podcast at LO_Sun Devils. Shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. And if you have not subscribed on YouTube yet, hit that subscribe button. We're trying to get to 1,000 before the season starts. We'll find a way to celebrate. I am open to suggestions. Rounding out this podcast now, a couple of questions we got to ask. First of all, depth for days. Like, what are you looking at here? You've got 2 sleepers, 2 breakout. You've got Jordyn Tyson, you got Troy Omeire, 2 guys that I think universally amongst Sun Devils fans, we agree are probably wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2, and guys that could have really, really, really big breakout seasons for the Sun Devils. After them, you've got the next 3 which is Xavier Guillory, Jake Smith, Melqaun Stovall, in whatever order you want to put them. Even still, those 3 could be number 2 receivers for you. You could take those 5 and put them in almost any order. I would tell you, as long as Omeire's wide receiver 1 or Jordyn Tyson is wide receiver 1, you can shuffle the rest of them around. So you can have Tyson 1, Jake Smith 2, Omeire 3. Wouldn't be surprised. You could do Omeire 1, Stovall 2, Tyson 3. Could see it. There's a lot of different possibilities that you can run here, and it's something that is really, really beneficiary to the top guys. You're not going to be able to double team Troy Omeire because you're going to have guys underneath who can beat you. So if you bracket coverage Omeire over the top, well, now we're gonna take that 10-yard gain underneath because you're so worried about the deep ball. And Stovall is going to eat, and Jake Smith is going to eat. They're going to do all sorts of stuff for you. And these veterans are really the backbone of this room. The Jake Smiths and the Melqaun Stovalls of the world are what's going to help this wide receiver room continue to tick and stay on schedule. They know what to do. They're seasoned. They've been around. They've done it. They're in their second year with the program. They know the expectations. There's a lot of value that you can place into having these veterans here. And some of these guys can do a little bit of everything. Like, sure, you've got guys who are more prone to playing one style over the other. Like Stovall, we mentioned, is a really good slot receiver and a possession guy. You have a Xavier Guillory who's really good at taking the top off of defenses. You have a Troy Omeire who's a really good post-up receiver in the end zone. But then you've got guys like Jordyn Tyson who, while he is a deep threat through and through, we've seen the upside for him to be able to do a little bit of everything. Jake Smith, kind of a jack of all trades. He can do a little bit of everything. You've got receivers in this room that can contribute various different things. And that variety that you have in the wide receiver room is what makes it such a good collective unit. Is you've got a little bit of everything. You've got deep threats. You've got underneath guys. You've got slot receivers. You've got red zone targets. You've got route runners. You've got a little bit of everything in this room. You got different size. You have different shapes. You have different play styles. Having that is going to be so important for the Sun Devils, especially when you look at the fact that you've got brand new quarterback situation coming in with Sam Leavitt. Jeff Sims is transferring in. Trenton Bourguet is the only returner from last year, and he doesn't have a ton of career experience. You need a wide receiver room like this, which leads us to the final question we have to ask. Can they elevate the offense? I've mentioned before, the run game is the strength of this team. In the running game breakdown, similar to what we did here, if you haven't checked it out, check it out. I said that the run game is going to be the way that this offense is going to work at their best. They need to run the football. You've got a ton of depth there. You've got 6 guys who could be your starting running back, and you'd feel good about it. Well, the way that they'll be able to help out the receivers is by sucking in defenses, and defenses saying, hey, we got to stop the run. Well, that could give your receivers one-on-one opportunities, which is where you need to also help out the running game. You need to say, hey, we're getting a lot of one-on-one looks, and they're sending 5 to 6 players on every down and leaving like 5 or less defensive backs on the field, 4 defensive backs on the field, 3 defensive backs on the field, depending on the way that the defense is currently trying to hold down the run game. What can we do with those opportunities? That's the question that this team and this receiver room needs to answer for themselves. Because if they're able to make the most of those opportunities, you have created a balanced offense. And for a unit that I am anticipating is going to be very run heavy, the best thing you can do is find a way to open up the passing game and make life a little bit easier on them. You can still go 60-40 and run the heck out of the football, but there's going to be games where defenses stack the box and they say, you're not going to run it. You're going to be forced to pass it, and you're going to beat us with your arm. That's where you need to have a good wide receiver room that can help make things easier for your offense. You cannot be a one-trick pony. You can be run heavy. You still have to have the ability to throw the football. And I think that the receivers here are good enough to be able to do that. You keep the offense balanced. Everyone's happy. Final question. Can you unlock the deep ball? That'll be the big question this year. And I'll kind of leave that up to you guys to decide. You've got deep threats. You've got Sam Leavitt, who's got more than a quality arm. Can you unlock the deep ball? I want to know what you guys think in the comments. Let me know. You can hit me up on Twitter at RichieBrads36, the podcast at LO_Sun Devils, wherever you're getting your podcast. Hit like, subscribe, turn on notifications so you get an update whenever we post new content. Shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. And don't forget, if you haven't subscribed on YouTube, subscribe on YouTube and help us get to 1,000 followers before the season starts. I will see you guys again on Monday. We're going to be taking a look at the tight end position next with tons of different options that the Sun Devils could fancy. We're going to talk about it on Monday. I'll see you then. Till then, you keep it locked right here on Locked On Sun Devils.